I met a dude when I was in the British Virgin Islands who worked for a big tech company. I don't want to say the company, but it's like a major company that, like, you know, they make like fucking jets and shit for the military. And he just was like, I don't see this. I don't see this. This just doesn't seem like a good path for the rest of my life. I'm seeing all these people that were managers and executives that are trying to work their way up the corporate ladder, and everyone's miserable. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone's overworked. They're all putting in crazy hours. They bring work home with them. You know, they hardly see their family. They make a lot of money, sure, but he was like, fuck this.
Welcome to Escape from the Cubicle, the podcast that brings you stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind to pursue their passions and achieve their dreams. In each episode, we'll dive into the journeys of individuals who left their corporate jobs to start their own businesses, play professional sports, or follow their unique callings. So, if you're ready to trade in your cubicle for a life of purpose and passion, stay tuned. Here's your host, Josh Anderson.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of Escape from the Cubicle podcast. Our guest today is Super Bowl champion and Tampa Bay Buccaneers long snapper, Zach Triner. Zach played football at Division II Assumption College in Worcester, Massachusetts, before serving his cubicle time at Fidelity Investments in a variety of sales roles. We discuss his journey to the NFL, winning the Super Bowl, and he shares practical advice on incorporating his process into your daily life. I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Zach, on the Escape from the Cubicle podcast, where we highlight entrepreneurs, athletes, and others who have escaped the confines of their cubicle to chase their dream and have done it successfully. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for the time today. So let's start off with, tell us about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Zach Triner. So I guess my cubicle journey started at Fidelity Investments. That's where we got to know one another. And that was actually one of the better times of my life, like learning those skills, cutting my teeth, kind of learning how the corporate life works, the vernacular. And as I was in the cubicle, I had a dream to chase the NFL. So I would work out before work, at lunch, after work, always trying to make that push to the NFL. And I'll let you kind of dictate that conversation. We'll share more about that later. But eventually I broke free and made it into the NFL as a player.
That's an amazing story. And I remember the days when you'd go over after work with a bag full of balls and work out in that. It was like an intramural type field next door, which, I think just shows the hard work that it took to get there. So you grew up in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. Tell us about Massachusetts. Do you have siblings? Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, I grew up in South Shore, so right in between Boston and the Cape.
Okay.
Grew up playing all the sports, lacrosse, football, basketball. Originally went off and played the college lacrosse, so I did that in upstate New York. We lost to Syracuse in the playoffs. Like, we played all the big name schools. That was a blast. Lived with like 8 other players in the team. Like, just, a great time. And then something was missing. I needed, like, I always thought lacrosse was my passion, and I always chase my interests and my passions. And I got to the end of the rope there and was like, you know what, I think I want to play football. And there was a late night conversation with a teammate who was like, you know what, I was getting recruited by a big name school. I wonder what would have happened if I chose football. And at 19, 20 years old, we were having this like regretful conversation, and something just didn't sit right with me. So the next day I went into the coach's office and was like, you know what, I think I'm going to go play football. And, he was great. All my coaches, I've been really fortunate to have great coaches, but he had just made sure, like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. So I transferred to play football at Assumption, low Division II Catholic school in Massachusetts, and
in Worcester.
In good old Worcester, Mass. Yeah, depending on where you're from, it's Worcester, Worcester.
Yeah,
you can always tell how far away you are from
Whenever
Worcester.
I travel, people, you're from Worcester?
Yeah.
No, Worcester.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a big decision to make. It feels like overnight. How long had that been festering, like that decision to switch from lacrosse to football?
I think I had always, that was probably one of my harder decisions in my life up at that point, was choosing lacrosse or choosing football when I graduated high school. And I don't know, I just always loved the sport. At lacrosse practice, we would do like one-on-ones with some of the other guys that played football on the team. And I don't know, I was just always talking about football. It was always in the back of my mind. I always had the dream, like, to go play in the NFL. Had the jerseys growing up. Just loved the NFL. Named my dogs after NFL players. Like, just loved the NFL.
Okay,
but
pause. What are your dogs' names?
It was Bettis and Brewski. So Jerome Bettis, Teddy Brewski.
Good players from our.
I need one on the
our
offensive side,
childhood.
one on the defensive side.
And great days watching Teddy Brewski as a kid. Huh?
Yeah, that's right. So that was what I did, and I don't know, I just always loved both, and eventually I was like, you know what, I wanted to get to the NFL. I don't know if I wasn't brave enough. Didn't think it was realistic to like articulate that or say it out loud, and I was like, you know what, whatever. I'll go play Division II football, and I just loved football. It wasn't necessarily about anything else. I just wanted to go play football.
Just to play football, yeah. So there's no expected value calculation of like, hey, I could make more in the NFL, or
no, there was none of that yet.
Okay, and then so you went to Assumption, played football there. You graduated, and you went to Fidelity.
Yep.
And tell us about that.
Yeah, so I graduated from Assumption in 2014 with a psychology and political science degree, and was like, what the heck am I going to do with that?
Yep.
What am I going to do with that next chapter of my life? And fortunately, I kind of stumbled across a couple of different things, a couple of opportunities, a couple of false starts, failed interviews, like just hitting walls, overdressing for some interviews, like just all those typical things that you do.
Fresh out of college, trying to impress the hiring manager. Yeah.
So I did that, and then finance was always this abstract concept, or personal finance was always this thing never talked about.
Yeah.
And, not for good or bad, but just in school, growing up, it just wasn't a common conversation. So I never took a finance class at Assumption. I still didn't really know how this real world stuff worked.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, Fidelity, that would be an interesting place to go learn that.
Yep.
And
especially
get paid
growing
for
up
it.
in Mass, behemoth locally.
Exactly.
Good place to start.
Great place, great training, a lot of respect, a lot of credibility. So I was like, yeah, let's go give that a shot.
Yeah.
And I interviewed for that. And this is actually a funny anecdote. So I get there, talk about overdressing and being insecure. I get there on Friday. And if you remember, Casual Fridays was always dressed down.
Yep.
So I get there and I'm dressed up for the interview.
Suit and tie?
Suit and tie, yeah, the whole gamut.
Okay.
And I go to the wrong place. They had just switched campuses. So I go to the old campus. Now I'm running around with chicken with my head cut off. I'm late. I get there, see people walking in. They're dressed down. I rip my tie off, throw it in my car, run in, and a couple minutes late. And everyone else is dressed suit and tie. And I don't have a tie. I'm dressed down now. I'm like, oh, gosh, this is how I'm going to start. But fortunately, I
clearly it worked out.
I regained my traction and did well in the interview. So.
And so you were in the phone center to start with?
Yep, that's right.
Taking the 800 Fidelity calls. And,
yep, so started at the ground level.
Yep. That's where I started too. I remember those days working. I worked a Wednesday to Saturday shift at nights.
I forgot about those schedules.
You could get some wild stuff during those days. But I agree, it was a good place to start. You get bashed in the head over and over, and eventually you learn how people tick and how to work with different types of people. So I think from that standpoint, really kind of invaluable experience. And then we first met when you moved over to the kind of institutional side, working directly with broker dealers, RIAs. What spurred the move from the retail side of Fidelity to the institutional?
So I had some trouble originally at Fidelity, getting my feet under me. At that service area, it was a lot of it was transactional service. It was just helping people out generally, mostly online. And I needed having that athletic background. I just needed maybe a little bit more sales, or I just needed a metric to hit.
Right.
That was more than just time per call and things like that. So I was looking for a sales opportunity, and I had since moved from service to the employee stock option plan. So we had Starbucks, Goldman, Bristol Myers, all these employees would call in, and we'd help them there. And I enjoyed that a little bit more. There was a sales aspect to it as well. And, you could be consultative and help these people out, and there was a problem that could be solved, and you could add value that way.
Right.
So I enjoyed that, and I realized that sales was maybe a better path for me, or at least that's what I enjoyed doing, going back to just chasing interests.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that, and then realized that there was a bigger sales role in Rhode Island.
Yep.
So you could go do wholesaling. And everyone I talked to actually was like, that's a hard thing to go jump into from service. Kind of the same thing on like the asset management side. Like, you remember everyone wants to be asset manager when they get to Fidelity, and they're
portfolio
like,
manager.
yeah, they're like, okay, good luck.
Yeah.
So it was not to the same intensity, but same thing when it came to sales. So I had to take a step back in order to take that role in Rhode Island. But I think back to following interest, I was like, yeah, no, that's a good role for me. So
Long term, was still.
Exactly.
So at this point, what year is this?
This was probably 2016.
16?
Yeah.
Where was the NFL in your mind at that point?
So when I originally interviewed at Fidelity, I had told them, like, hey, I'm going to try to chase this NFL thing. It's an interest of mine, one of those passion projects. And I think it was a sales role. Like I said, I was interviewing for a sales role at this point. So I think they accepted a little bit of delusion, and they're like, sure, man, like, it's okay if you try to make the NFL. We'll take the ambition that comes with that delusion for the sales role, because that's a good reward for them. Less than 1% of guys are going to get there. So sure, you can go at that as long as you're hitting all your numbers and you're a nice guy to be around. So we did that, and I think the first year I maybe missed a day for the NFL. Yeah. I'd take a leave of absence and I'd come back, and the second year was maybe a couple weeks, signed with the Jets for the offseason, and came back. And that's about where we are in the journey right now.
Yeah. When you were at Fidelity, it sounds like you didn't hate the job. It sounds like you were interested in it.
Yeah.
Was there a turning point that made you say, okay, I'm done with the corporate cubicle world and I want to go pursue my dream? Like, what was the nexus? What was the point that you kind of changed trajectory?
So if we stay on the story journey, right? So my first year, had a cup of coffee with the Texans and the Patriots, and it was just a couple of days, and I'd come back and work at Fidelity. Then the following year was a couple of weeks, maybe a month with the Jets, and then got cut, and I'd come back. And so I'm doing this back and forth with Fidelity, and now I have like a full foot in one camp and a full foot in the other. And I'm like, still doing well at Fidelity, but a lot more of my focus is being pushed into the NFL. And for the NFL, like, I still have this job that I'm like kind of leaning on. It's not necessarily pulling efforts, and I'm not subpar in either direction, but I wasn't fully committed to either. And I heard a good saying across the journey, like, if you're 99% committed to something, you're uncommitted. Mm-hmm. And I was 99% committed to football. So the third year I signed with the Packers, and I played all the way the last week of the season. They signed me to the practice squad, and I was there for OTAs and there for preseason. And then I get cut from there. Long story short, get cut from there. And now I return back to Fidelity, and Dennis Hogan was my manager at the time. And I come back. Yeah, good old Hoagie. And I come back, and like almost without question, I don't accept the return to Fidelity. I quit. So if you've ever seen Batman, there's a scene where Bruce Wayne is in the cave. He's been imprisoned, and there's only been one other guy that's gotten out. Mm-hmm. And I guess this cave is the cubicle for this example. So the only way that he's able to get out of this cave is that he climbs and jumps and fully commits himself without the rope. Everyone else has jumped with the rope. Yep. So for me, I had this rope on me somewhere. I was 99% committed, but in order to be 100% committed, I needed to cut this rope. But I first needed to identify it. And for me, it was Fidelity. And it had nothing to do with Fidelity. Like I said, they've been phenomenal. They've been supportive. But if I wanted to actually make this work, I was going to need to be fully committed. So I walk in, talk to Dennis, and I'm like, hey, it's going to be a tough conversation, but I have to quit, and I can't accept this leave of absence return. I got to go do this thing. And then I moved to California, went out to train with some guys, like-minded guys that are either in the NFL or pursuing the NFL.
So at this point, when you went back and told Dennis, hey, I can't accept it, You had no job lined up. Mm-hmm. You had just the dream of getting into the NFL. So that's really the jumping off the cliff moment. That how did you have the balls to do that? Like what was going through your mind at that point?
It's going to be hard. I don't know if it's courage. I don't know if it's bravery or confidence. It's more so just a stubborn, like, it's easy to look back and armchair quarterback and dramatize and be like, no, I was just really confident and I was brave. And like most of it was just like, if I really want to do this thing, I got to go for it. And my blueprint was if I made one step progress every year, I would keep going. And I felt that there wasn't going to be any more progress with the track that I was on. So if I wanted to stay true to that North Star and make progress, I had to fully commit myself in order to take that next step. And that was quitting Fidelity and like pushing all the chips in on this thing. And it was either gonna hit or it was gonna fail. And I was at this, like, there was a bunch of momentum, there was energy there, and I was like, I got to go for this thing. It
was like, hey, if I'm gonna chase this dream and give it a shot, I got to be 100%. It can't be 99.
Yep.
And it's now or never.
That's right.
And if you looked back in 10 years and you hadn't done it, you probably would regret not going after it, huh?
Yeah, and I think that was the other framework that I always came back to was it wasn't this strong belief that I was going to make it. It was a strong belief that if I failed, it was okay. Like if I failed pursuing this dream, whatever, man. Like you don't make the NFL, that's fine, but I went for it.
At least you can look back and say, hey, I gave it my all.
Definitely.
I didn't make it either way. But in your case, you made it and you won a Super Bowl. So I think it worked all out for you.
Yeah, I think so. So then the point of the journey, I have just quit Fidelity. I'm moving to California. I hit a rocky point with all of my relationships. I stripped down pretty much all of my relationships in my life. I moved to California, was living out of my car at this gym. I paid a $10 membership a month to shower. I would go to a local hotel and get breakfast on the go until I got yelled at, and they picked up on that. And
so you're literally living homeless in your car, showering at the gym.
Yep, that's right. Like all the chips were in on this thing.
Wow.
And fortunately, I went to a charity event. I guess I should take a step back. So I'm living on my car for probably a handful of weeks at this point. And I'm like,
Can we actually pause?
Yeah.
We're back. So you said you went to a charity event.
Yep. So I went to a charity event. I was living out of my car at this point, and I had just hit one of those end roads where I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Like it's not really working out how I thought it was going to. In my head, I would just move out there, I'd train, get a little bit better, and then the NFL would be like, oh, please come play for us. And that didn't necessarily work out. So I go to this charity event, and I end up meeting this couple that's from Hull, a couple towns over from me back home, and they were like, what? You're living out of your car? Like, that's ridiculous. Come live with us. And they took me in. They would cook meals for me every night, like let me stay at their house. Like they were a godsend. And long story short, I was there for a little bit more time. Resources were kind of dwindling, so I had to move back to Massachusetts. And at this point, mind you, I don't have a job to go back to. So I work for a friend's moving company for a short amount of time. They had moved like hedge fund managers, really successful athletes. Like, so I go from this white collar job to this blue collar job, and it was a hard mindset to adjust to. And I kind of get to another end roads here where I'm like, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? Like, there's a fine line between the poor sap at 27 still trying to make the NFL and the guy that does make the NFL. And I was tangibly there. Like, I don't know if this was true or not, but I just felt like as I'm walking down the streets in my hometown, like people would look at me and be like,
guy who almost made it.
There's the guy that's like still trying to get to the NFL. And I don't know if that's probably just an insecurity that I've dramatized over the years, but like it was just tangible. I could feel the pressures building.
Yep.
And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who owned the moving company, and I was like, I don't know, man. I'm probably at the end. I got to kind of pack it up and reassess. And he was like, just give it a couple more weeks. There's one other guy that played in the NFL from my hometown, Sean Morey, And he actually had worked at this moving company. I didn't know this, unbeknownst to me, but he worked at this moving company before the Patriots called him. Mm-hmm. And he was at the same crossroads, like, I don't know, let's go, get a normal job. And he was like, just give it one more push and give it 2 more weeks. And if it doesn't work out, whatever, you can pack it up, but give it one more push. And, probably day 13 of that 2-week stretch, the Bucs called, and I was ready for the workout. And
day 13 of 14, the Bucs called.
Yeah. And I was ready for the workout, did well, and that was 2018, 2019, and been there ever since.
Wow. Lot to unpack there. So, one, when you first moved out, completely homeless, living in the car, moving place to place, like that alone, like, when you made the decision at Fidelity, did you understand that was going to be kind of your situation, or no? You just made the jump, and
it was more so like I'm gonna go and figure it out on the way. And you hear like the entrepreneur logic of like you're gonna build the plane as you jump type of deal. So it was more so like I just got to get out to California.
I'm going out doing it, and so why California? What was out there?
There's a guy. So John Carney has a gym out there. He kicked in the league for 2 decades, and he owns a gym in Southern California where kickers, punters, long snappers will go train. They'll weight room train, and they'll go to the field, and like you're just around like-minded people, and I felt a pull to go out there and be with that group and learn from them, and I figured I'd get better with those people, and I could learn something from John in the meantime.
Good kind of group of people to be in, and there's probably not many in the country that have similar camps to that. So you were going to the epicenter of where you could develop.
Yeah, that was the specialist mecca out there in Southern California.
Okay, so then let's talk about that point of not quitting, because I think most people, if they were living in their cars, sleeping or showering at a gym, sneaking into hotels to get the continental breakfast, they would say, hey, this isn't worth it. I'm going to go hang it up, head back into the warm cocoon of corporate life where you have all these nice benefits and free coffee in the cafeteria and walking trails and all the little perks that they give you that, is just kind of there to keep you in the cubicle. What was keeping you driving past that, right? Saying just one more week, 2 more weeks, like what was the point that just like, how did you find the strength internally to keep going?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I don't want to position it in the way that like poor me, I'm homeless. It was more so like an adventure. Like I needed to do. It
was actually fun.
Yeah, like
you were having fun with it.
I needed to do this. Like this was the only way to make this happen. I don't have money to buy a house or rent an apartment. I got a car. I got a Jeep Wrangler, a 2-door Jeep Wrangler that I took the front seat out, cut a Tempur-Pedic mattress topper, and I slept in that. So like, I don't know. It was just like, this is how I made it work.
The 2-door one too?
Yeah.
Those aren't too long for a tall guy like you.
So it was more so just an adventure. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go down this path, and I'm going to go down it for as long as I think it's worthwhile, and have some fun and meet some people. And, this was what pushing the chips in on. I think you hear that often is like, bet on yourself. What does that mean? Like, go have an adventure. Go do, like, don't have any guarantees. Don't have any understanding of what it will look like. It's often, the word often used for something like this is called faith. So like, I just had a ton of faith that even if it didn't work out, I'd learn something from it.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so day 13, Bucs call. You fly out to Tampa.
Yep.
Work out for the Bucs. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I fly out there. So usually there's one opening for snappers. There's 32 of us. There's no backups. So there's one opening, maybe 2. So on average, 1.5 openings a year. And what happens is there's this cohort of people. There's a bullpen of snappers that if someone goes down or someone either ages out or retires, like there's that group or that cohort that'll get the first shot. Mm-hmm. So when I first graduated, there was a group of 4. They would get all the calls, and then either they would age out or they would, get on a team, and then there would be a new cohort. So at this point, I was in that cohort. I was part of that 3 you'd see the same guys at the workouts, the same kickers, the same punters, the same snappers. So when I get to the Bucs workout, I'm the only snapper for there. I think there was a couple kickers, maybe a punter or two. And, sometimes it's a workout for the kicker. Mm-hmm. It wasn't necessarily a workout for the snapper. I remember working out for the Browns, and they were like, hey, honestly, this isn't a workout for you. We just needed someone to service the kickers. And I was like, don't worry. I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah.
And so, it doesn't always work out where if you get a call, they're looking at you. You're just part of this trio, and, they need that operation. So in my mind, I had just come from Cleveland, I think maybe Detroit, and I was like, yeah, it's probably just one of those workouts. So I didn't put a ton of pressure on myself and did really well. And after they're like, yeah, we're going to sign you. I'm like, oh, all right, that's awesome. So I've gone through so much failure at this point where I genuinely am process oriented. Like I'm not chasing a result, and I'm just going to go to the workout and, whatever happens. Right. And fortunately that mindset allowed me to do really well.
So they signed you.
Yep.
That was Jameis Winston days.
Yep, 2019.
Yep. Good old Jameis.
Jameis was awesome too, by the way.
He was at Florida State when I was there.
Okay.
And he was a character for sure.
He might be one of the most funny. He's
yeah.
just accidentally funny. He doesn't try to be. He just is himself. And
how was he as a teammate?
He was great. Like there are certain quarterbacks. I've been in a couple different locker rooms, so I just have the opportunity to see like different characteristics of people. He's one of the guys that doesn't matter who you are. He'll come sit down, have lunch with you, talk it up. Like big believer. He's just a great guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad to see he's still chugging along, and I had high expectations for him coming out of FSU. He was fun to watch back then. Yeah. So Jameis was there. What, your first season with the Bucs?
My rookie year, 2019.
And then Tom Brady, the GOAT, comes in your second year with the Bucs. Mm-hmm. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So what was that like, having someone of Tom Brady's caliber come in to the Bucs, which let's be honest, at the time, I mean, I went to high school around here. I worked at the Bucs Stadium parking cars when I was a junior, and they weren't so great for a number of years, right? So what was that like? What was the feeling on the team when you go from, Jameis to Tom Brady?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I drew from Tom being a teammate, first of all, I'm from Massachusetts, so like to have him and Gronk sign on to the team, all my friends were like, only you would stumble into being teammates with these guys.
Did they follow you there?
Yeah. So that was a ton of fun, but that was probably the second time actually in my life where there's this rising tide leadership style. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but say 70% of the team was the same from the year prior. And the only thing that changed other than that 25% of new talent was an expectation level. So like a really good leader has, use a CEO, for example, can come into a company, and if he's able to raise everyone's expectations of themselves, they get more out of themselves. So when Tom came into the locker room, there was an expectation that he was chasing number 7 and like, we're going to win. Mm-hmm. And what that does for your work ethic, what that does for your focus, what that does for like your commitment level, talk about commitment level, you were committed to a championship, and whatever needed to be done to get there, you were going to do. And I felt the same way with my coach that came in at Assumption. He's now the head coach at JMU, but he did the same thing. Like he expected you to have a championship mindset and just expected, you don't have to expect to win, but you're expected to do things and perform at a certain level that is helpful for everyone that is in close proximity to them.
You have the expectation of winning, and everyone buys in. Every single person in the locker room was bought into that, and it wasn't like, this is a job. It was, hey, we're chasing a championship. Mm-hmm. Was that, having been on different teams, was that, what was like the vibe in the locker room and amongst the team? Was it different than anything you've experienced, or?
Yeah, I think it's hard to describe the nuances of each year, but each year is different, right? There could be a younger team that is energy guys, and they're just going to come together and find a way to win. Or in this case, probably had a veteran locker room, so most of the guys were experienced. They knew the way to move. They knew the way to talk. They knew the way to go about their weekly schedule, their in-season, their out-season schedule. And you could tell that it was different in that sense because everyone knew why they were there. We had a ton of big-name guys that came in order to win a championship. So, like, when you're building a team, it's interesting. You need rookies, you need new talent, and then you need, like, a way to build expectations, or you need veterans in the locker room to shepherd these young guys and then help with, like, expectations. And, like, there's a balance between constructing a team. I'm not a GM or a front office guy, but just from what I observed.
Think of the similarities as you're saying that. I'm like, it just switch team out with company or employee, and there's a lot of similarities there in having, hungry, excited young people willing to go the extra mile for what's needed, and then the more experienced people. And it's interesting the dynamic of teams that are successful on the field and in business as well. So that season comes in, Tom comes in, you guys have a great season. You win the Super Bowl. Tell us about the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Super Bowl was interesting, and it for a couple of reasons. One, my first foray into the NFL was my grandfather took me to a inter-squad scrimmage with the Patriots back at Foxborough Stadium. So randomly, I got picked to go on the field at the end of the scrimmage and meet one of the players, get a jersey, get a picture. So I get to meet Ben Coates, which was great tight end. Yeah, exactly. He was Gronk before Gronk. He doesn't get enough love.
He was awesome. Yeah.
Was
he 88? Was he?
I think Terry Glenn was 88.
Terry Glenn,
87, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So I get to meet Ben Coates, and it was just by luck. It wasn't like a scheduled thing, and that was where the NFL became tangible to me. And I was like, oh, this is like really cool. These guys are huge. They get to do what they love, and they're not just kids. Like, this was awesome. So the reason why that's important, Super Bowl comes around and you get an allotment of tickets. And what I was able to do was my parents, my wife, my friends that have been with me, my football coach, like all the people that are really important to me, and my grandfather. So when you win, you get to pick two people to come down to the field with you. So I chose my wife and my grandfather. And there was like this full circle moment where he was able to bring me onto the field for that inter-squad scrimmage, and now I'm able to bring him onto the field for Super Bowl. And it was just like a really
full
cool
circle.
moment.
Yeah, that is cool. That is awesome.
Yeah, so that's one. And then two, the interesting part about winning is there's this build-up your whole life. You're trying to win this game, and then it just ends. And I think the lights are about to turn off.
I do too. I was like, it's getting dark.
Oh, there you go.
We're not talking enough with our hands. There we go.
So there's an interesting part. That was the great part about the Super Bowl. And then the flip side of the Super Bowl is you win and it just ends. And you realize that if you are results focused, back to like the process focused, there's this huge void that comes in where you're like, that was it. Like, that's what I've been training my whole life for. And it took some time to learn what they mean when they say Super Bowl hangover. It was pretty tangible the following year, not from myself, but from everyone else, like including myself, not just myself. And it's hard to start over and rebuild and realize that, like, when you get this thing that you've been chasing your whole life for, if that's what you think is going to provide happiness or fulfillment, it might for a second, but on the flip side of that, it's like, ooh, something's missing here.
Oh man, that hit home, right? Like, I think so many people can relate to that point, right? Like, how many times do people say, if I just had this, I would be happy. If I just had that, if I just achieved this, or, in your case, win the damn Super Bowl, right? Like, it still shows that it doesn't matter how big the goal is, that fulfillment doesn't necessarily come from that goal, right? So, like, year after Super Bowl, you're struggling with that. I'm assuming the rest of the team's struggling with that. How do you get back into the right mindset and keep going, with a relatively short off season?
Yeah. So one thing that actually happened was week one, we're playing the Cowboys, and I pop a tendon on my finger, and so I get hurt and ended up needing surgery and missed like maybe 7 weeks or so.
Week one.
So
come back week 8.
Then. Then come back. So maybe there was a combination of like, okay, if you feel that fatigued, God's like, all right, well, here's a big break and here's some time to recoup. So that was what happened to me the following year. But
yeah. Then come back in. You guys had, I think you made playoffs that year, and but didn't win the Super Bowl. Was that Patrick Mahomes' year to win? I think the year after.
I forget. They all like blend together.
They do blend together.
No, you know what it was? It was the Rams, because we won at home, and it was the first time that ever happened. And then the Rams copied us the next year. They're like, what the heck? That was our thing.
Yeah. So okay, you've reached the epitome of basically every football player that ever was their goal, right? Like every little league Pop Warner player, has at least that in their mind, like winning the Super Bowl, right? Even if like in your case, right, you were playing Division II and just doing it for the love of the game, right? Like I gotta imagine that's in the back of everyone's mind. Yep. So now that you've climbed Mount Everest, like what's next?
Yeah, so I think I always had the goal of making the NFL as a means to an end. Like, okay, I want to go to law school or get an MBA. That's a big check.
It is.
If I can go
a lot of time
into the NFL, maybe they'll pay for it. They have tuition reimbursement. So my goal was always to make the NFL in order to do that next thing. And then it was a matter of figuring out like what that next thing is going to be. And for me, I didn't know if I was going to make the NFL. I didn't know how long I'd be in the NFL. So every offseason, I just made sure to jump into a program that the NFLPA offers, or jump into a program that the Shield offers, just by way of being on my
What's
resume.
The Shield?
Like the NFL.
Okay.
So like
okay.
If you have
gotcha.
if you have the NFL
Shield,
Shield on your resume, like it opens a bunch of doors.
So what are some of the programs they have?
So one of them is a program with Harvard. So Harvard Business School offers a pro athlete program that you come into Harvard Business School, you get linked up with mentors that are students there. You go through the curriculum for a semester with them. So you fly in for the one weekend, go through a couple of classes, go through the semester with your mentors, and then on the tail end of that semester, you have like a final project from the case study. So what was interesting about that is I lived 30 minutes from campus. So I would drive to campus during the semester and just go to as many classes as they would let me go into.
Yeah.
And I got a ton out of it because of that. Like I remember there was one professor at the tail end of the program that was like, "Wait, you're not a full-time student here?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm in the NFL. I'm just here for like the semester." And he was like, "All right, God bless you. I thought you were like you've been here so much. I just thought you were a student." So that program.
What class
awesome.
was that one? Do you remember?
It was a bankruptcy class. It was the CEO.
Sure, that's interesting.
It was the CEO who ran Caesar's bankruptcy.
Really?
Yeah, the casino.
That's fun.
And so he kind of laid out like, okay, this is what happened. This is the partnerships. This is how he navigated it. So it was really cool to
That's really cool. So you've done that with Harvard. I know you said you've done one with I think a lobbying firm in DC.
Yep.
Any others that you found interesting?
That one was actually really interesting. That was the one I did this past off season. Forbes Tate is a lobbying firm in DC. They handle the lobbying affairs for the NFLPA. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know about lobbying. Like House of Cards was interesting to me, that series on Netflix. And I enjoyed politics, having the political science degree. And so I was like, you know what? This seems like an awesome opportunity. I'm going to go learn. Yep. And so I got to go there for a couple of weeks and have some meetings with politicians from Texas, from Florida, from where else was it? Mostly those two states, but it was a learning opportunity. It was like, I don't have any expectations. I have a couple of off-field interests that I'm able to parlay and use. Like, okay, this is what I'm doing off the field. How would government affairs plug into this? And really just learn that aspect of business.
Were you thinking, hey, maybe you want to be a politician after the NFL?
I don't think so. You know, never say never, but as of right now, I enjoy the lobbying side, the government affairs side, but I don't necessarily have a calling to go into politics.
Yeah. So it's back to investments after the NFL, or what's your goal post league?
Yeah, so all of these things that I'm doing in the off season are shaping the tools that I can draw from, right? Once I find that next thing. So over the past several off seasons, I've linked up with a private equity firm out of Boston. A couple of former Fidelity executives, hedge fund trader, has gotten together, and they go around and buy industrial companies.
Mm-hmm.
So was working with them for the past couple off seasons, and then formalized what that would look like with my involvement. Okay, the NFL, whenever the NFL ends, be able to step into that full time. And the cool part about this is, like, once you have, I'm going to say success in air quotes, like once you have a certain level of success, you can be a little bit more choosy on who you want to spend your time with. And so I just have been really fortunate. The guys over at Delcam, Steve, mm-hmm. Rich, and Stu, are just really guys I want to hang out with. And,
helps when you like your coworkers, right?
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time with them, so
exactly.
You might as well enjoy that time. And always a little tougher in a large corporation is what I found. And so you got into private equity through one of these programs. Is that how you got linked up with these guys? Or
no, I actually linked up with them. I was just playing in some traffic and was like, hey, I want to learn private equity. I want to get in. And just making some calls, whether they had the Shield on their resume or they played football in college, like just trying to find some inroads to private equity. And similarly to the NFL, where I would also play in this lane of traffic, and they were like, yeah, the NFL is tough to get into, door closes. And there was a lot of that in private equity. Like,
yeah.
Hey, I'm trying to get into private equity. They're like, well, you didn't go to Stanford, you didn't go to Harvard, so maybe you should choose something else. And I was like, I understand that, and I appreciate the prudence on, like, this is a hard mountain to climb, but mm-hmm. I've heard the same narrative for the NFL, and I was able to climb that mountain. So it's not the same mountain to climb, but I have the blueprint on how to climb high mountains. I don't need someone shutting the door in my face and telling me I can't do it. So yeah. After a series of those doors closing, I linked up with Steve, and he's been a mentor in that space for several years before that partnership formalized.
Yep, that's great. So you kind of met him through. Is that like the fourth time we've heard in this story of someone shutting a door in your face and you just persevering through it? I think that's like a key theme through kind of your story, is like just the grit and perseverance when someone says, hey, you're not from the right pedigree, or hey, you don't meet our criteria. It's like, okay, I'm going to go meet that. I'm going to go kind of shut you down. So yeah. I'm excited to see what you do on the private equity side. And maybe a quick kind of explainer on private equity, because I think a lot of people have heard the term private equity, but might not understand it. Can you share a little bit about that and just give a
it's a pretty overview? Broad term.
It is,
right?
Yeah.
And if you really want to be all-encompassing, like, private equity is any company that's not traded on a public stock exchange can be considered private equity. So venture,
so a pizzeria
real
down
estate,
the street,
exactly, like a franchise, anything
yep.
could be private equity. So for us, it is private industrial companies, manufacturing companies. The same way you would buy a house, right? You put some money down, you mortgage the rest of it, and you make payments. We go out and do the same thing. So we find a company, put some money down, we borrow money for the rest of the transaction value, and then we try to make that company a little bit better, and then we'll sell it on the tail end of whatever that investment thesis is.
Just like house flippers do, but with companies.
Yeah,
right.
And the cool part is, like, there's some value add. Like, let's say you're buying a multifamily, right? And you buy a tier 3 and turn it into a high tier 2. Like, there's ways to go about value add.
Yep.
It's the same thing with a company. There's just a couple more levers to pull. So for football, it's a lot of physical levers. There's some, for my position, you're going left or you're going right? That's about it.
Right.
So to use your brain, there's certainly some aspect of that, but there's just not as many levers as you can pull compared to the business world. So being able to pull, okay, what's operations look like? What does the management team look like? What is the bottom line? What is the top line? How do we grow both of those things? There's a lot more levers to pull, and in order to be successful, you can be a problem solver and always coming back to just chasing interests. That's
solving complex problems. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's really cool. That's a really cool, story to get to the league, to reach really the top of the league, and then to have really take advantage of the resources and programs available to you to set yourself up for that next thing. When you were saying it earlier, I meant to chime in. Like, what's the oldest? Like you mentioned, people aging out of kickers and long snappers. Like, how old are they when they age out?
Usually 37, 38 is the ceiling.
It's pretty old for a player,
yeah.
Right? And other positions, like a running back, would be, late 20s, early 30s?
Yeah, I'd say, I'm just taking a shot in the dark here, probably 32, 33.
Yeah.
Is like when other positions will age out, and then 36, 37 is when
so it's
specialists
really
can age out.
Critical. And do you talk to other players about taking advantage of these programs so they can set themselves up for after the league? Or
definitely, yeah. So I was a player rep. I still sit on the advisory board for the Players Inc. union, and so I'm always advocating for like, hey, go do as much as you can while you have the shield. Like, these conversations are different when you call and you're an active player versus you call and you're a former player, and like just trying to get. There's different business acumen in the locker room, but just trying to get guys to understand like this opportunity is pretty good and you can leverage it for more. And then in terms of like personal finance, just having that finance background, not being prescriptive, but like, okay, this is basically what you should know, basically what you should avoid, and not telling them what to go into, but really just telling them what to avoid. Is what I've been doing.
Yeah. A lot of pitfalls there in the finance world that can really derail the direction people are going, for sure. Yeah. So we're coming up, on kind of late the end of this. So what would your advice be? Think about you sitting back in Smithfield in the cubicle, or think of someone else kind of in those same shoes, whether they want to pursue a professional sports career, or they maybe have an idea for a startup, or just want to get out of the cubicle, get out of the corporate world and pursue something else. What's your advice to someone like that, your old self, on getting to where you are now?
It's a good question. So I've tried to figure out like the best way to. I'm just a normal guy. I didn't do anything special, but like, what are the tools that I used to get here, and what are the tools that I would use for that next chapter? And then maybe those same tools will be helpful for someone that's maybe sitting in a cubicle that has this idea that they want to do, but they don't know where to start, or they don't know if it's reasonable or not. So to boil all of that nonsense down into an answer is, don't build a castle in the sky, right? You can't just dream about something and then hope it happens. There's got to be traction on it, and you've got to be able to measure in some capacity where you're going and how you want to get there. So castle in the sky is like, man, I'd love to play in the NFL. Well, what does that look like? Okay, for me, I would go down every snapper that played in the league. This is before I was in. How tall is he? How much does he weigh? How fast is he? How does he snap? Okay, and then I would measure all of those things. 6'3", 245, high 4.9s is all their 40 times. Okay, I got all those things. I can do that. And then how accurate are they? Okay, they're probably, if I can hit 8 out of 10 snaps perfectly for practice, like that's a good spot. Can I get to 9? I'm probably in the vicinity of, of an NFL snapper. And then, okay, how do I get into the NFL? There's a decision maker who's saying, okay, there's a GM, there's a director of player personnel, there's scouts. How do I get in front of them? Well, there's a specialist camp. There's 2 a year. There's one in Arizona. There's one in California. Okay, how do I get there? Well, you just have to pay and get in front of these people and be good enough. Okay, so I'm going to go do that 2 times a year. And then if I make it into the NFL, I have to do well at the combine. Then I have to go to a tryout and do well. Then I have to get into OTAs and do well. Then I have to get into a preseason, and I have to do well in the preseason in order to make the 53. So if I can go down this, I'm calling it traction. Now there's like a plan of execution on this. It's not just, I want to get to the NFL. Well, how do I do it? You just lay it out. And now every year I can say, am I on this plan? Am I following this? Is there traction? Am I doing something? Am I executing an idea? Mm-hmm. So if there's something you want to do, you want a website.
So just like when we were in sales on the sales desk, right? You
Yeah.
had to have a plan and metrics you could track.
Yep.
So he was really approaching it in that very, analytical mindset of like, hey, do I have the kind of baseline skill? Where do I need to get to that point? And then having a mapped out path with goals, measurable goals along the way.
Yep. Yeah. And so what do you want to do? It's like fundamentally important to identify what you want to do and not just like go bump into a bunch of walls. So it was, I want to play in the NFL. Okay. That is a concrete goal. I want to, if I'm sitting in the cubicle, I want to be a motivational speaker. Well, what does that look like? Get in front of someone, find someone that hires motivational speakers. There's got to be someone that's done it before you. Okay. What'd they do in their early days? So I remember reaching out to a couple of guys in the NFL, like, hey, how'd you get there? And then they would tell me, and then I would go implement that into my plan. Like, okay, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z now because of their advice. So, like, there's whatever you want to do has been done before. Go find someone that's done it and go ask them questions. And that's really all I did, like, humbly reach out to people and be like, hey.
Most people were willing to help, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as you have a direction that you want to go.
Yep.
It's hard to reach out to someone and just be like, you talk generally. Hey, I want to get to the NFL as a snapper. Here's where I came from. Here's where I'm going. How do I get there? Do you have any advice? And it could be no. Okay, that's fine. Do you know anyone that would be able to help?
Yep.
Great.
And I think that's a key point, right? I think there's a lot of people who have an idea, have somewhere they want to get to, but don't have that roadmap and specificity. So they go out to potential investors and don't get funding because, they don't have their idea fully baked. And,
So I have a company idea, right? I want to start XYZ company. Well, how do I do that? Okay. Well, there's a group of seed angel investors or seed investors that fund ideas. All you have to do is have a business plan and maybe a partner. Mm-hmm. Maybe not even a partner. You just need a business plan and a pitch deck.
Right.
And if they think it's a good idea, like, sure, here's $50,000 across, their 10 friends, and that's enough for you to get off the ground. Like, you don't need this full mature company to go out and raise money. You just need an idea, and you got to have a little bit of a that plan to have some traction on. Like, you don't need the full thing.
Is there a path to victory?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Anything you want to close out with? Anything I haven't asked you that you think is relevant to this discussion?
Do you have anything more specific that you want to ask?
No.
Okay. Then,
no.
Yeah.
Just curious on if there's anything else on the advice piece or anything like that. But
yeah, I think for the advice, if there's someone in that cubicle and there is like just an inkling of an idea, just follow it until it's boring.
Yeah.
And then follow it until you just never know how long that path will go. Like if you just keep following interests.
I'm thinking about your 2 weeks, right? Like if you had not gotten the call on day 13, day 14 comes, day 15 comes, you gave up on your dream. You're back in, some cubicle somewhere, and you never got your Super Bowl ring, right? Like that piece. What's your advice to someone on finding that strength, that last little bit of strength to keep going?
Yeah, I'd say like have some sort of a network, right? And it could be, there's been times I've reached out to just young guys that are graduating college that have their pro day coming up, and I'm like, hey man, like go for this thing, you could do it. And they're like, why'd you reach out to me? Like, we don't even have a relationship. I'm like, I just like small school guys. I like guys that are going after it. So the point of what I'm saying is like, there's this ethos that you plug into once you fully commit to doing something that things start to build around that. So if you just commit to like wanting whatever that idea is, you're like, I'm going to go build this thing. I have no idea where to start. You'd be surprised at how many people step into your life and you're like, they'll either motivate you, they'll be helpful to you. Like the power of someone being like, hey Josh, that's a great idea, man. I hope you pull it off. And like, I'm here for you. If you ever need someone to talk to, like that's enough for you to keep going.
Yeah.
You just got to find, whether it's people on Instagram, there's a vision board for your house or something, like just do those small things and
gather supporters,
gather people around you. Just like I did in California, like gather all I did was surround myself with like-minded people because I could feel myself getting to a point of like, I can't do this by myself anymore. Do the same thing. It could be as simple as like, 3 people in a group text that meet every Saturday over text and just be like, hey, what are you guys doing this week? Mm-hmm. What hurdles did you jump over? What roadblocks did you run into? And then for them just to be like, man, that sounds like a tough week, but like next week's you're gonna kick ass.
Yep.
That's enough. Like that's all you need.
Yeah. It's that network, that friend group that helps you stay motivated and stay accountable.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think a few things I'm walking away with is, one, if you have a dream and you want to achieve it, there's never going to be a perfect time to do it unless you fully commit, right? You can't do something 99% and be at the top of your field, right? You got to fully go into it. And then once you make that decision, there's always going to be hurdles and, temptation to go back to where you came from, to go back to somewhere that's more comfortable. But, having that perseverance to, ignore some of the outside influences and be motivated by that network that you build. Those are the couple key things that I'm taking away from this discussion.
Yep.
So I appreciate the time, Zach. It's been really great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully there's a couple of gems, and I'm honestly pretty accessible. So like if there's someone that's listening and they're on the cusp or they just need like that one person to reach out to, like just DM me. You'd be surprised at how open people are. If you do have a fully committed idea that you want to do, like I don't know how much help I'll be on the business side of things, but if you need someone to be like, you got this, man, or you got this, I'm here for that.
DM you on Instagram,
Yeah.
X. Are you on X?
I'm not.
No.
I have a handle, but I don't
Legacy
go on it
Twitter.
much, so,
Yeah,
just
same.
Zach_Triner.
Zach_Triner on Instagram. So great. Well, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out directly to Zach, and appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks.
Great.